Good morning. Welcome to Tiny House Fest Vermont. First year. Woo! I'm Erin Miley O'Keefe, and this is Lisa Kuhneman, and we also have another cohort, Betsy Hall, who's around. And I guess it was maybe 5 months ago, we said, I was holding little tiny house talks in my house, and Betsy said, we should do a festival. And I was like, I don't know, I'm building a tiny house this year. That's like, seems kind of crazy. And then she said it again. And then the third time she said it, I was like, okay, let's do it. And here we are. So thanks for turning out. Lisa wanted me to remind you about is on the Indiegogo site, we're crowdfunding this festival. A house that myself and many generous hands, including my husband, in the last 6 days, we built the paper boat house, which is the SIP house over there. And that's going to be done this fall. And if you want to stay in it in May of next year, you can go on the Indiegogo site. You know more about that. You want to say a little bit about that?
Sure. There are one-night opportunities and two-night opportunities to stay in Miley House. There are some images that if you haven't already gone over, and I think they're posted over there as well, you can take a look at what the finished house is going to look like. I don't think you've seen anything else out there like it. If you've seen a lot of tiny houses, this one's definitely unique. So, it's a great opportunity because once Erin and Kevin move in, I think that opportunity will be gone. So thanks for coming and making it what it is. Yeah.
So, and like Lisa said, this festival is really about integrating into downtown Brattleboro. So we're really encouraging also the restaurants throughout Brattleboro have Tiny Bites menus, which is why we don't have food vendors here. So please, if you're not from Brattleboro or you are from Brattleboro, take a walk through the town and support our local businesses.
That's part of what makes it great. We do have sponsors that are helping. Being the first year, anything that starts up the first time, people want to see a track record, and then they get on board. So we do have a few brave sponsors I'd like to mention. Manny's TV and Appliance has been very generous. We really, not only with financial support, but just a fantastic online cheerleading campaign. So we appreciate that very much. We have sponsorship from Chroma Tech up in Bellows Falls and from Recycle Away. They have containers for recycling. Usually see them in public places and schools, public buildings. And they're centered right here in Brattleboro. We have a list of partners, local partners, that is, every time I look at it, I can't believe it. Really want to shout out to the Latches Hotel. Their support has been incredible. They knew what we were after when we said we wanted to be in this space. They understood what we were trying to do in the way of imagining how our spaces could be used. And they got on board and were very supportive.
So Tim Mathiesen is up, and Tim has been doing lighting design for interior residential spaces for 25 years. He's local to our area, and he can work with people on spaces as small as 80 square feet, you said?
You bet.
Yeah, and then if you happen to be building a concert arena, Tim is also your guy. So whether you're...
I have business cards we can exchange later.
So maybe we can ask you about the lighting for the party. Thank you so much for being here.
Maybe. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you all. Okay, so thank you. That was very good. No prompting whatsoever. I can't believe nobody's taken a selfie yet today from the stage. I'll try and do that at the end if there's time. So we're talking about lighting and interior design for small spaces. One of the things to start with is a unit that you've seen next door. This is a prototype sketch of Aaron and Kevin's new tiny house on wheels. I think they've dubbed it the paper boat. And we're gonna start off by talking a little bit about how you make a small space feel bigger by talking about daylighting. This particular shot illustrates on the left where the entrance to to Aaron and Kevin's tiny home will be, the double doors on the east side of their tiny home. And by removing the doors, you can see right through to the west side of the tiny home. So daylighting is really a matter of looking at window placements and trying to provide a look through. Since you have such a small space to begin with, we want to make sure that it feels as large as possible. And one way is to create the sense of space using the outside. So a look through from one side of the building to the other is one way to accomplish that. This is another view of that prototype sketch. And if you've already taken the tour next door, you've seen what that actually looks like physically. And here we are at the end of the building. Right below that large window is their living room couch. And by removing the window, you can see through to the end of the space, the far end, and see the ladder and the windows to the outside. So again, just creating a view through. Oh, not so tiny. But this does illustrate a point really well. Along with having your windows on your vertical walls, having an oculus like the Pantheon, or a skylight, a solar tube, a sun tunnel, anything that you can penetrate through the roof to allow the sun to move through the space, and to also, when you look up, to be able to see the sky. Again, creating a sense of more space inside of a tiny home. There also is a lot to be said for your material choices and use of color in your tiny homes that can really change the way it feels. Now, the psychology of color and the emotions that different colors elicit in us is a topic that I can't go into in depth today because there's not enough time. But I would encourage you to take a look, do a web search. A variety of sources will give you this opinion plus thousands of other opinions. Not everybody agrees on exactly what emotion comes from a certain hue or a certain color, but there is lots of research over decades proving that different colors do affect us differently. So I encourage you to take a look at that more in depth. But here are a couple of examples. This blonde on blonde tiny home really shows ceiling walls all the same material and all the same color, and really gives you a sense, along with excellent window placement, really gives you a sense of how large the space can be. Another example of that, here's an all-white space. I love the huge window wall. I don't like the fact that it's not operable, or at least a portion of it is not operable, but I love the fact that it's floor-to-ceiling, wall-to-wall, really offering great views. And then with the white walls, you also have those vertical lines. And vertical lines in any of your spaces will give you a sense of higher ceilings, give you a sense of more vertical space. And on the ceiling, those horizontal lines are actually helping to increase the sense of breadth, the sense of width in the space. So this has examples of all one color, kind of being a more expansive view, lighter color, They also will give you a sense of expansiveness. And then you have the vertical lines and the horizontal lines, both doing their job to make it feel like the space is much larger. Here's another example where the horizontal lines are, in this case, on the side walls. They're really giving you a sense of increased depth. The walls, in this case, and the ceiling are all the same color, and that's giving you that expansive sense, but the horizontal lines are really taking care of making that far wall recede and giving you a sense of more space. There also are ways to use mirrors and reflective surfaces, glossy paint, using glossy fronts on your cabinets, things that will reflect light as it moves through your space, or the artificial light that you use at night. This just happens to be on a textured wall. One thing about textured wall we can talk about a little bit more in depth later is to actually do a wash of light or graze that surface. So pretending that this is the surface of the wall with the brick facing on it, or stone, or whatever you're using, if you put a light, instead of putting the light out in the middle of the room, if you put a light very close to that surface and just wash the light down the surface, you'll end up seeing all of the texture in your wall. That's something that just can create some visual interest. Okay, now we're moving on to more lighting. LEDs are your friends. Whether you're working with a tiny home that is powered by solar and battery, or working with one that you've hooked up to line voltage to 120 volt, you'd want to stick with LEDs partly because they're super efficient, partly because they produce very little heat, and partly because they're small and easy to hide. This particular one is a 12-volt system. You can see the individual LEDs are along this tape. It comes with a self-adhesive on the back of it, so it's easy to tuck up underneath a cabinet or a shelf. It can be put along the kick space of a cabinet, like in the kitchen. It can be hidden under stair treads that lead up to a loft. There are a number of different ways to use that. And the small box is a transformer that takes the 120 volt and steps it down to 12 volt in this case, or they also come in 24 volt. This chart has a slight comparison between the low voltage system, which is represented by the bottom graphic, and a line voltage LED strip or rope represented in the top graphic. So they're both types of LED tape that are available, or rope or LED strips. They're sometimes called as well. But one thing that is pointed out here, when you're working with a 120 volt system, you can actually have a very long run. So for instance, you might want to put lights around the perimeter of your ceiling as a way to give a general wash of light throughout your space. So you can have one very long run and you don't have any transformers to worry about. If you're looking at that bottom graphic, you can only get somewhere between 15 and 20 feet to each individual low voltage strip or tape. So you have more transformers, you have more connectors, you have longer installation time, things like that. Here is this company, Jesco, is the company, one of the companies that makes a line voltage LED tape or rope. So we can ignore this, but I want you to take a look specifically at the coil. One of the things that is illustrated here is all the dots that you get from an LED tape. There are ways to avoid that. There are some companies, like this one, that make a covered or frosted look, and it helps the LED dots disappear. So there are a couple of places where this would work really well. Here it's illustrated on stair treads, so safe transit up to your loft, and also in a handrail. And it's really wonderful to get a wash of light without having the individual LED dots. Also, while we're talking about LED light bulbs, there are a couple of companies that I think do a great job with LED replacement bulbs. So anywhere that you would use an incandescent light bulb of various sizes, you can go to a company like Cree. They have LED screw-in replacements that give a very good color renditioning. They give a very warm tone to the light, so it looks a lot like what we're used to in incandescent lighting. And they have 4 different sizes, or 5 different sizes. You can get lights that are connected to via Wi-Fi to an app that you put on your phone. And they also have a 3-way light bulb, so that if you have a reading lamp, for instance, sometimes you might want it on the lowest setting so that you're just creating a glow in the space, and other times you may want to turn it up full so that you can get the maximum amount of reading light or task light. And all of Cree light bulbs are dimmable with regular standard dimmers that we're used to having in our houses. Another company that makes LED light bulbs for replacement is Philips. This particular one is unique in that it's tunable white. They give it that white ambience title, but this means that the light, which is measured in degrees Kelvin, we go anywhere from just over 2,000 degrees Kelvin up into the 6,000 and 7,000 degree. So at the bottom of the scale, just over 2,000, we have very warm light. It's amber in color. It's kind of like sunrise. Very, very warm light. And then at the top of the scale at 6,000 and 7,000 degrees Kelvin, we're talking about a very icy or cool blue light in many cases. So this particular light bulb is tunable within that whole range. That might mean that in the morning, if there's not enough sun coming in, you could tune the light so that it gave you that very warm sunrise kind of look and feel. And later on in the day, you could switch that and get into the mid-range of degrees Kelvin so that you'd have something closer to daylight. That's the idea. There also are ways to use LEDs for what we're used to as a recessed can light or a hi-hat. It sometimes is also called. This is also from the Philips company. The surface light is only about half an inch or just slightly larger than half an inch down from your ceiling space, but it doesn't require a kit to be put into the ceiling to go into where the insulation is going. It's there so that just in a junction box, so it's only taking up about 2 inches worth of space in the ceiling. You don't have any thermal issues. You don't have any worries about ice condensation buildups or any mold getting started. And lastly, for actual units, I know that Mel introduced and talked about the Lunos ventilation system earlier today. This is something that you can put in your bathroom, in your kitchen, in your tiny home, and it's a programmable ventilation system. And if you do decide you want to use a ceiling fan, I would encourage you to keep the size relatively small so that it's a good design proportion to your space, and one like this that has an LED light on it so that you are able to get light and ventilation. Here's a unique problem that comes from Aaron and Kevin's tiny home. This is illustrated from the sketch how the loft also has a workspace, and actually Aaron is in both spaces at the moment. I'm not sure how that's possible. But what it illustrates for me is we needed to find a way to have a multifunctional light, something that would work in both spaces, whether they're in bed and want to read or whether they're sitting at the workspace. So where the small circle and the X are, we're going to put a light something like this, just a simple swing arm light. It both pivots at the junction so that it can swing from being over the bed to being over the workspace, and it pivots at the head so the light can either be face up and reflect off the ceiling, it could be pointed towards the wall and reflect that way, or it can be face down so that it's task light either on the desk surface or on the book. One more LED. This is also not quite tiny, but it illustrates that light can go both up and down from a single fixture. And for those of you who are designing a house that has a little bit of an overhang, this is something that can create a little bit of reflection off of the overhang, but also give you a nice pool of light. Maybe it's outside your entry door, maybe it's outside of, like on a small deck. Excuse me? That particular light comes from a company called WAC, W-A-C Lighting, and the fixture name itself is Rubix, R-U-B-I-X. So multifunctional lighting, also multifunctional furniture. Here, a piece of artwork, a photograph, a painting is in a frame that actually becomes a table. And a couple of variations on the theme, the one on the left with a mirror, and the one on the right with some storage for kitchen or dining. Another piece of convertible furniture in a kitchen, this actually has a pivoting countertop, and the countertop in its use or task position for doing prep then pivots and can become your dining room table, so that you could probably get certainly 2 people on either side, in this particular case with this size, so that you could have your dinner party for 4. And one last kitchen with a pull-out worktop that also has storage built into it, and this, since it's open on both sides, also allows you to have a space for eating. You're putting a chair or a stool on either side. One more item from Aaron's tiny house is the ship's step ladder, where the alternating treads are going up that back wall. Have a nice view out to the back, out through those windows. And then on the right, you have what's called a spiral ladder, so a little bit of space saving in some ways. A few more space savers. A foldable table only ends up taking up a couple of inches, but would sit 3 or 4 people. And then stacking stools is always a good way to gain some space in your interiors. 2 examples of beds. This one I like because it slides underneath the small platform, so the bed can be made at all times and just slide it out of the way. And the surface up above, in this case, has some storage. I think there is also a stool in there tucked into one of the storage units that they can pull out and play guitar. And another example of a bed, this one's on rails and is fully automated. So at the push of a button, they can take the fully made bed, lower it down onto the living room couch, which is an L shape, and the living room becomes the bedroom with a single push of a button. And now you're thinking I'm a little crazy because we're talking about space savers and I put up a bathtub. But this bathtub is actually made of a flexible material that allows it to go from a full bathtub. It sticks out a little less than 5 inches from the wall. So those of you who absolutely love baths and don't like showers, this is your option. If you look up bath board online, you will find it, because there's only one of them. So wrapping it up, just to talk briefly about what the design process is when we're talking about lighting and talking about material choices, whether it's a tiny home or even a little bit larger. The process is always, what type of light do we want to use? That's something that we work together, you as a client, me as the designer. We talk that over, talk it through. What do you like? Do you always want to have candlelight on the dining room table? Do you really like to use recessed lights, as some people do? So we figure that out. We also then start looking at where we're going to locate the lights. And lastly, it's how do we control that? I'm an advocate for dimmers in many locations, most locations. And I would also say it's very important to layer your light. Don't light your space just one way. Light it 2 or 3 ways. With LEDs, that's especially easy because they're so small. And it's important to give yourself an opportunity to have a different look, have a different feel to the space. So layering the light, putting it on separate controls gives you that option. So you can create a very bright look. You can create a kind of a softer mood and do that with multiple fixtures. And lastly, I would say it's important to use what I call a feature light, something that maybe it was handed down to you and it's a piece that you cherish or treasure. Maybe it's something that was a luxury purchase that you want to feature in your home. Here's a contemporary copper and a wood veneer light that might be part of that. Maybe there's a particular style, in this case a deco fixture, or maybe you pick something from the mid-century modern period. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.